Good morning. Merry Christmas. Today's video is part in the kitchen and part showing a little bit of our crazy game, Christmas game fun time. I will be showing my kids a little bit. I don't typically do that, but this was kind of fun, and I wanted to show a little bit different side on the channel. You see me and John, and so this was kind of with our boys on Christmas morning. So I hope you are well. If you're new here, this is Sewing Back. We're in the kitchen, and I'm Brandy. And so the first thing that I did when I got up Christmas morning was I started on our breakfast, and we ended up this year having a eggs Florentine casserole, and this was from Taste of Home. I will link the full recipe in the description. And the other thing we had was 100% freshly milked Kamut wheat waffles in my new waffle iron, and I have made these a couple of times. And I got these over from Felicia at Greens and Grit, and I will link her recipe as well. And one of the things that I really loved about this recipe from her is she does not use any sweetener in her waffles. And I liked that because if you're going to use like honey or maple syrup or a jam or something like that, that's plenty of sweetener. I also like the idea of the waffles not being sweet because you could totally use this to make like a savory sandwich or something like that if you wanted to make these up, because it makes 12 waffles in this recipe that I'll show you. And so that is totally an option you could do. They're very delicious. I used Kamut. You could use, I think she recommends a white wheat, but you can use Kamut in place of that, and that's what I had, so that's what I used. So the first thing that we're doing here is we're working on the Taste of Home recipe, the eggs Florentine casserole. So I browned up some sausage, and then I took the fat that was left in the pan and I cooked down some onion, mushroom, and fresh spinach. Now in the recipe it called for frozen spinach. I didn't have that, so I used what I had. I also kind of switched up my cheeses a little bit with what I had on hand to make it work. So you can do how, if you want to totally follow the recipe, or if you have to just go in your refrigerator and make do with what you have, well, it'll work and it tastes really good. So I did have to buy some store eggs because my girls, I still have part of them that are not laying yet. I do not use artificial light in my coops. I let my girls rest, particularly after a molt. I just want them to naturally come back into laying eggs. I do have Goldie Girl really doesn't lay eggs anymore. She's almost 5 years old, and so every now and then I may get an egg from her, but it's not very regular, and that's okay. Um, so these were store-bought eggs. These were pasture-raised chickens, and I try to support as much as I can. You know, when I have to purchase these type of products because I can't use my own, I do try to support people who love chickens like I do. So, it's funny because when we get to the waffles, you will see the difference in the yolk color because the waffles I had enough fresh eggs from the last couple days from my own chicken. So anyway, you have 12 eggs for this casserole, and you're gonna put some paprika. The recipe calls for about a fourth of a teaspoon. I eyeball it. That's just kind of what I do. And so you're going to beat up your 12 eggs, and you're going to also end up adding 2 cups of milk, and and then you just pour that over that casserole, and then you bake it, and you have to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and you bake it. I think it was about 30 minutes. It is really one of the best tools that you can have in your kitchen, and this is coming from someone who is SafeServe certified. I'm a manager, SafeServe have my manager SafeServe certification, because I work with seniors, they're a high risk population, and so that was one of the courses that I took this year. Just so along, I've taken many courses. I've first aid and all the things, so I've had to do a lot of different ones. But this one was really good, and one of the best tools I found that every kitchen must have is a thermometer. You really need to have a thermometer so that you can check temperatures of pretty much anything you cook. Foodborne illness is for real, and it costs every demographic, every age group, lots of money with food poisonings and stuff. So, learning how to get your foods clean once you purchase them from the store, and then how to cook them and coming up to the right temperature. So an egg casserole you want to have at 165 degrees. That is a safe temperature for a casserole for all demographics, all age groups. So that is what you're going to be looking for in that, and that even goes rings true because I have pork in this, but more so because I have egg in it. Also, I have onion in this. Onion actually can cause a lot of foodborne illness. So just some little helpful tidbits there if you didn't know all that. Those are things to take into consideration, and to think about your knives and your cutting boards and all that kind of stuff, keeping things clean and not having cross-contamination. It's a real thing. A lot of home cooks don't think about that. But if you're doing potlucks, taking somebody a meal who's sick, you have a loved one dealing with maybe cancer or something, or you have someone elderly in your home that you're cooking for, or a young child, they are all high risk populations. So keep that in mind. And it's just a good rule of thumb for everybody. So I put that little paprika on top. You could have mixed it in the eggs. I put it in my oven for 30 minutes, and you will see in just a bit how beautiful it turns out. So the next thing we're on to, I had freshly milled a couple of cups of kamut in my Whisper Mill. I didn't show that, I've shown that before. And so I am measuring out 3 cups of freshly milled flour. Again, you could use whatever you wanted to. I believe she recommended the white soft wheat, and I went with kamut because that's what I had, and that's kind of one of the ones I prefer. You also will need a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, and 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And you're going to mix those ingredients together. So you kind of, once you get them all in the bowl, you want to whisk them up to try to incorporate them so that they're all mixed up well. And before you start adding your wet liquids, you will add half a cup of oil. Now in her recipe, she recommends peanut oil. She says it doesn't have a flavor. I have a severe reaction to nuts outside of almonds. And so I will not be using peanut oil. I actually used coconut oil. I like using a nice coconut oil for baked goods. It doesn't make it taste like coconut. And I feel like you get a nice finished product. You could use an olive oil if you wanted to. Some olive oils though may leave a certain flavor, and for some things that's okay. For something like this, I don't know if you would necessarily want that. So, but it's such a good heart healthy oil. Some people might use avocado oil, could be a good choice, and some people might just melt some butter. You could totally do that. The next part is when you're using freshly milled grains, it takes a minute for the moisture to hydrate the wheat. And so I've mixed my eggs here. You can see I've got I actually have 3 cups of buttermilk because I'm using buttermilk. And so I'm mixing in first my egg and my oil and That's the oil right there. And then you just kind of want to incorporate those, and then you want to add in, start with 3 cups of buttermilk, and you want to kind of let it sit for a minute to kind of hydrate the grain that you have just milled. It takes it, because it's freshly milled, it takes a minute, and it will thicken up. You'll kind of get a feel for it if you have enough liquid in it. And I actually, each time I have made this, I have always made it with kamut. And so it can be different with a different grain if you're grinding it up, okay? Or if you're just using like an all-purpose flour. So start with less of the buttermilk, and then if you need more, you add more. And so I actually, each time I've made this, I've actually used almost 4 cups of buttermilk, which her recipe calls 3 to 4. So you got to kind of get a feel for it, and get that right kind of consistency that you want, especially because you want these to be a little bit thicker than maybe a pancake batter, because you're putting them in a waffle iron. And so that's kind of the only part of that is different. And I will say, I watched, it might have been the video on this that she had. I can't remember, because I went to her, I found her like a blog post, and you know how a lot of blogs now have a video attached or whatever. And so, and she was excited or something because she has the same waffle iron I have, except it's a 2 waffle plates. It has 2, you could do 2 waffles at a time. Mine is a singular one. It is the Cuisinart, and it is wonderful. It works really great. I had to play around just a little bit to find the setting that we liked in ours. And so, yeah, but it goes pretty quick, and I was dropping, I want to say it was probably about 1/3 of a cup to maybe, I don't even think it was quite half a cup of the waffle mixture into the waffle. And what we found is we like the setting 5 on ours. If you want yours lighter, then you just would have to play around with your own waffle iron. And when they're ready, the light turns green, and then you take it off and you just repeat, and you'll repeat this like 12 times, because this one really does make 12 big nice waffles. And I think in her video or the blog post, she said, these should be eaten fresh, and because she didn't necessarily like the texture, of a reheat or something like that on this. I will say that I don't feel that way. I actually found these do really well as a reheat. And so you could make a batch, and then you could have them throughout the work week. We had no problem doing that, and they were very tasty. And so this was our Christmas breakfast. And then we went on to our Christmas games. So our Christmas games, if you cannot tell, I was a first grade teacher for a long time. And this is the part of probably first grade I miss, were all the fun, silly little games. And so having all boys, they're good sports. And I come up with these little different Christmas games that they have to compete with each other for. And their prizes were like, I had prizes of like their favorite stocking sweet item. So we start out with stuff like that, and then we get into the cash prizes, which then the competition really begins when there's some cash involved. And cash always is good, particularly with young adults, and gift cards and things like that. So we make it fun and have a good time. So this was a candle competition that started with like 5 candles blowing out. Then we went to the marshmallow competition, where they had to use a straw and see how many marshmallows they could pick up in their cup. And my one son decided to put the whole straw in his mouth and use his mouth as like a vacuum to pick them up. And while I thought he might be the one that won, he did not. My son, that followed the rules and diligently got them all in the cup one by one marshmallow. And so that was a lot of fun. And so we had a really good time with that. And then we had a bow toss. I don't think I got a picture of that, but we did have a bow toss, and there was cash underneath the plates. I didn't know, so they all had a different color bow, and depending on where it landed. So that was kind of an easy game and fun. And then I'm trying to think. We had we did that. Oh, I had a blindfold chopstick challenge with Christmas balls. They had to try to pick up Christmas balls in 60 seconds, and then of course this was one of my favorite ones I always did with my kids at school, and it's using a candy cane to try to pick up as many candy canes as you can. You can see several of mine learned to cheat. They called it the bulldozer method, and so this was just kind of some of the fun ways that we had to celebrate Christmas as a family, and our little cozy was just all of us. I know that in the years to come, we won't all be able to be together. They'll grow up, get married, have their own families, but I will certainly treasure these times in my heart. And so I thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.